Has the jury agreed upon a verdict?
Breaking news. They have a verdict. Rabbi Fred Newlander is guilty on all charges. Good evening, everyone. I'm Yuki Washington.
And I'm Pat Shiraki. After 8 years and 2 trials, this is what Rabbi Fred Newlander heard this afternoon.
Guilty, guilty, guilty.
The jury finds the Cherry Hill rabbi guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Carol, on all 3 charges against him. We have live Team 3 coverage tonight of the Newlander verdict. Colette Cassidy, live in Cherry Hill in the rabbi's neighborhood. But we begin with Robin McIntosh. First on the air today when the verdict was read. He has late details tonight. Rob?
Well, Pat, it took 2 trials over 2 years, more than 27 hours of deliberations over 4 days. And finally this afternoon, around 3 o'clock, the jury here in Monmouth County, 7 men and 5 women, finally found Rabbi Fred Newlander, the Cherry Hill rabbi, guilty of first-degree murder, capital murder, felony murder, conspiracy. And that means that tomorrow we begin the penalty phase as Rabbi Fred Newlander faces the possibility of death.
Carol Newlander, what is the unanimous verdict of the jury? Not guilty or guilty?
Guilty.
That one word rang out like a thundering gunshot as Cherry Hill Rabbi Fred Newlander stood before a jury of Monmouth County residents who spent nearly 27 hours and 4 days of deliberations to find him guilty of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy for arranging and paying for the 1994 murder of his wife, Carol.
We, the jury, unanimously find that Fred Newlander, as an accomplice, purposely procured the death of Carol Newlander by paying and or promising to pay money to another person or persons to commit the murder, or B, unable to agree unanimously on A. Which one did you select?
A.
That means the jury found Newlander guilty of capital murder by paying admitted hitmen Len Jenoff and Paul Daniels to kill his wife, an aggravating circumstance that exposes him to a possible death penalty.
We are very pleased by the verdicts returned this afternoon by this jury. We now move to a very critical phase of this case. It is extremely important that we are mindful of this defendant's rights as we begin that phase. Therefore, no information or statements will be coming from the prosecutor's office or anybody in the family of Carol Newlander at this time.
We're disappointed with the result, obviously. Beyond that, there's not much I can say.
What do you do next?
Well, tomorrow we're going to prepare. We're going to be prepared for the penalty phase and proceed tomorrow morning.
What did the rabbi take? So today's guilty verdict's the next to the last chapter in this 8-year-long saga, the Rabbi Fred Newlander murder case. Tomorrow, the final chapter, the penalty phase. During the trial, the rabbi did not take the stand in his own defense, but tomorrow, during the penalty phase, his attorney says the rabbi will take the stand, this time to plead for his life. That's the story live in Freehold. I'm Robin McIntosh, KYW 3 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Robin, and an excellent job there from day one. Well, this guilty verdict is the climax of a case which has haunted a Camden County community for 8 years. Colette Cassidy is live at the Cherry Hill Synagogue, where Fred Newlander was once the rabbi. Colette.
And much more than that, Yuki, this is Congregation Makor Shalom. This is the synagogue that Fred and Carol Newlander founded, along with several other couples many years ago. So back on November 1st, 1994, this community was really rocked when they heard that Carol Newlander had been murdered in her own home not far from here. Now here, 8 years later, November 20th, 2002, to hear that her husband, also the founding rabbi, Rabbi Newlander, has been found guilty of arranging her murder. The people here at Makor Shalom had not heard about the guilty verdict when I first called them to see if they had a reaction. We called them just a few moments after the verdict had been announced, talked to a spokesperson, and she became very emotional on the phone as I told her, said, you know, this has been such a difficult time for us, such a difficult 8-year period, and now to hear this today brought closure to them. Certainly a guilty verdict was difficult for them to hear. They are planning to make a statement at 5:15. That is the first statement we will hear from Makor Shalom. Again, the president of the synagogue planning to make that statement at 5:15. We will, of course, bring that to you live as he makes it. Reporting live in Cherry Hill right now, I'm Colette Cassidy, KYW 3 Eyewitness News.
Colette, thanks very much, and we'll get back to you. The wheels of justice moved at a painfully slow pace in this case, with police and prosecutors working for 8 years before they got their guilty verdict. Larry Kane joins us now from the newsroom with the timeline of the case. Larry?
Pat and Yuki, remember what happened in the beginning? Remember well that there were many hints that prosecutors were looking at the rabbi as a possible suspect in the murder of his wife. But it took years until he was actually put into custody. Tonight, let's take a look at the sequence of events. It was back on November 1st, 1994. Carol Newlander was murdered inside her home in Cherry Hill. Then, the next summer, on August 16th, 1995, her husband, Rabbi Fred Newlander, was first identified as a suspect. But it wasn't until September 10th, 1998, he was actually arrested in the case. Then, 3 years later, Newlander's first trial began in October of last year. It ended with a hung jury a month later. His retrial, which was moved out of Camden County, was held roughly a year later and culminated today with the guilty verdict. The penalty phase starts tomorrow. Rabbi Fred Newlander could be sentenced to death. We'll have much more on this story later in this hour and at 6 and 11 tonight. Now back to Yuki and Pat in the studio.
All right, Larry, thank you very much. Now a major development in another murder in our area, this one in Chester County. 85-year-old Mildred Allen was beaten and stabbed to death in her home. Now police identify Stephen Pinder as their prime suspect, wanted for questioning. We have live Team 3 coverage. Let's begin with Esther Miller in Tredyffrin Township, where the murder happened. Esther.
Well, Tredyffrin police are trying to figure out why someone would want to kill an 85-year-old woman inside her home. Neighbors say they knew Mildred Allen as a woman that was a very well-known volunteer, and it seemed like everyone we talked to that knew her loved her.
I have no idea in the world who would want to hurt that woman.
Ruth Lamp is a next-door neighbor and dear friend of 85.